I didn't say a word when my boss called me a loser in front of everyone. The conference room was so quiet after he said it that I could hear the clock ticking above the whiteboard. "You're a loser," he barked, stabbing a finger toward me. "This new manager isn't." 30 pairs of eyes slid away, pretending to study their notepads. My cheeks burned. My hands, clenched under the table, dug little crescents into my palms. But I didn't give him what he wanted. No tears, no protest, just silence. Silence can be heavier than any comeback. The meeting went on, my humiliation folded neatly into a bullet-point agenda. The new manager, freshly hired, fresh suit, fresh smile, clicked through slides like he'd been born holding a laser pointer. Every graph, every forecast, every win, my work, 2 years of it. But no one in that room would have known. The boss sat back, arms crossed, eyes glinting, waiting for me to crack. I didn't. I opened my notebook instead and wrote one line. "Let gravity work." The air smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase markers. The hum of the projector filled the silence I refused to break. Every so often I caught the reflection of my own face in the black glass of the TV screen. Blank, calm, forgettable, just the way I wanted it. After the meeting, people filed out quickly, avoiding me like I carried something contagious. A few murmured, "Hang in there," without eye contact. The new manager lingered, patting my shoulder with fake warmth. "Tough crowd," he whispered, smirking. His watch gleamed in the overhead light, the same model I'd once thought of buying after a bonus I never got. I moved past him without a word. At my desk, I plugged in a small, ordinary USB drive. The system automatically synced the timestamp backups I'd been keeping for months. Every version of the models, every email chain, every signed-off plan. I wasn't hoarding, I was documenting. Because when people like my boss and his golden hire play their games, the only armor that matters is proof. I thought back to the first time I realized I was being erased. It was a status update 3 months ago. I'd presented a framework for optimizing vendor transitions. Weeks of analysis condensed into 3 slides. The boss nodded, said we'll circle back. 2 days later, the new manager presented the same framework, polished with stock photos and buzzwords. Applause. The boss praised him for his fresh thinking. I remember the way my colleagues glanced at me, then quickly looked away. That was the night I started keeping receipts. Now, in the office glow of monitor light and recycled air, I flipped through my notes. Every stolen idea had a date. Every changed KPI had a screenshot. Every omission from a meeting invite had a calendar log. My silence wasn't weakness. It was collection. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I was still at my desk, the office nearly empty. The boss walked past, stopped, and leaned on my cubicle wall. "Don't take it personally," he said. His cologne hit my throat like chemical burn. "Winners and losers. It's just the way the game works," he grinned, showing teeth. "Be a team player, and maybe you'll learn something from him." I met his eyes for the first time all day, just for a second, just long enough for him to know I wasn't broken. Then I closed my laptop and left. Outside, the night air felt cold and sharp, like it could cut through the office stink clinging to me. I walked past the glass facade of the building and caught my reflection again, a figure in a dark coat, face unreadable. Across the street, a bar buzzed with laughter from people who hadn't spent the day being gutted alive by words. I kept walking. I didn't need sympathy. I didn't need advice. I needed patience. Because people who build their thrones on stolen credit and public humiliation eventually forget. The ground beneath them is unstable, and gravity never sleeps. When I got home, I dropped my bag, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table. My hands finally stopped shaking. I opened my notebook and wrote tonight's entry. The date, the meeting, the quote. "You're a loser." Then I underlined it once, calmly, deliberately, not as a wound, as evidence. Tomorrow I'd go back in, smile politely, and do exactly what was asked of me. No more, no less. Because every obedient step forward was one step closer to the cliff they didn't know they were walking toward. And when they finally looked down, they'd realize I hadn't been a loser at all. I'd been the gravity. People always think humiliation happens in a single moment. The insult, the smirk, the silence afterward. But real humiliation seeps. It spreads into the spaces where you thought you were safe. The day after that meeting, I felt it in the way my inbox filled with CCs that used to be 2 lines. I felt it in the way conversations hushed when I entered the break room. Even the interns, still learning where the bathrooms were, looked at me like I was a cautionary tale. The boss had a way of reshaping the office like gravity itself. His moods determined who got invited to lunches, who got projects, who got left behind. And now, with his winner, the shiny new manager, glued to his side, the hierarchy was official. He had his golden child. I was his example of failure. I told myself to breathe, to observe, to keep adding to my notebook. That week, the new manager was leading the preparation of our quarterly deliverables. In practice, it meant he hovered at my desk, pointing at graphs I'd already prepared, asking obvious questions in a tone that suggested I should thank him for his brilliance. Maybe, he'd say, we present it with less detail. Executives hate clutter. Then he'd strip out the nuance, the risk flags, the error margins, and paste his simplified version into his deck. On Thursday, I walked into a conference room to find my own slide template on the screen, only the footer scrubbed of my initials. He stood at the front, rehearsing lines in the mirror finish of the TV screen. His voice had that practiced energy, too loud, too confident, the kind of sound that makes people believe until they stop to check. He turned when he noticed me, grinning like we were partners in crime. Teamwork, he said, patting the remote like it was his sword. I smiled back. Because what else was I supposed to do? Tell him I could pull the file history right now, that the metadata still showed my name, my timestamps, my hours? No. I let him keep polishing stolen silver, unaware that the tarnish was permanent. Later, the boss called me into his office. His desk was cluttered with papers he never read, a half-empty protein shake sweating onto a contract draft. He leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head, as if he was granting me an audience. Listen, he said, I'm moving you into more of a support role, less front-facing. You're better behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. That's what you call the basement before you lock someone in it. I nodded once, said nothing, and walked out. My new title, unofficial but understood, was Shadow. Shadow the Golden Boy. Shadow his projects. Shadow his decisions. Make sure nothing collapsed under his weight. And if it did, be ready to take the fall. But shadows see everything. I saw how he panicked when numbers didn't align, how he copied phrases word for word from old reports, how he ignored compliance checklists because they slow us down. I saw the way he stayed late, not working, but waiting for someone else to leave so he could ask them for quick help. And I saw how the boss looked at him, not just like a protege, but like a reflection. The manager was everything my boss wanted to believe about himself. Polished, unburdened, untouchable. The pressure mounted. Deadlines were pulled forward. Deliverables doubled. He started assigning me tasks with a smile that sounded like threat. Just clean this up for me. You're great at the details. He meant, do the work, don't take the credit. One night, close to midnight, I was still at my desk, combing through a dataset he'd mangled. Rows misaligned, formulas overwritten, entire sections mislabeled. If this went up the chain as is, the company would be promising clients performance we couldn't deliver. I fixed it quietly, documented the change, and saved both versions, the wrong one and the corrected one. Evidence. The next morning, he strutted into the daily stand-up, coffee in hand, sunglasses still perched on his head like he was late to a beach party. He presented the clean data set as if it had sprung from his brilliance. The boss beamed. See? That's initiative. I stood there, my jaw tight, my hands folded. Silent. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Silence means patience. Even in that haze of praise cracks showed, a junior analyst pinged me privately. "Didn't you fix that dataset last night?" I replied with a simple smiley face. Nothing more. Because if one analyst noticed, others would too. You don't have to scream truth when whispers spread it for you. By the end of the quarter, the boss's golden child was the face of every win. His name was on every deck, his signature on every memo. Mine, buried in acknowledgments, if at all. And still, the pressure grew. "Support him," the boss would say, his tone dripping with mock encouragement. "Help him shine. You don't want to be difficult, do you?" Difficult. That's what they call you right before they try to erase you completely. But what they didn't see was the quiet architecture I was building. The version histories, the approval chains, the emails with exact timestamps. What they didn't see was the clients who preferred to speak to me because I remembered details. Their kids' names, their renewal clauses, their hidden worries. And what they definitely didn't see was the tiny cracks forming in the golden boy's armor. Because confidence without substance is just noise, and noise always collapses in silence. There's a particular sting when someone steals your work in plain sight. Not whispered, not hidden, just lifted whole, polished and paraded as if you never existed. By the time it happened for the third time, I stopped feeling shock. I started feeling strategy. The theft wasn't subtle. One Tuesday morning, I opened the shared drive and saw a folder I didn't recognize. Innovation Framework V2.0. I clicked it. My diagram stared back at me, except the color scheme had changed and the footer with my initials was gone. He hadn't even bothered to rename half the tabs. The formulas still carried my shorthand, my peculiar way of flagging error margins. By lunch, the new manager was presenting it to leadership. Swagger in his voice, laser pointer circling graphs like a magician revealing tricks. The boss leaned forward, nodding like a proud parent. "Now this is the thinking we've been missing," he said. I sat in the back, my face calm, my hands folded. What no one noticed was that in the version history, my name was stamped again and again. Creation date, edit trails, metadata, the digital equivalent of fingerprints. I didn't call it out. I simply clicked download as PDF and saved the original to my encrypted folder. Another receipt. It became a pattern. I'd submit a proposal through the proper channels, only for it to vanish from meeting agendas. Days later, it would resurface with his name attached. He was bold about it, too, dropping little digs at me in hallways. "You've got great raw ideas," he'd say, grinning. "They just need polish." Or worse, "You're more of a behind-the-scenes thinker. I'm more of a communicator." Behind the scenes. Communicator. Code words for thief and showman. One afternoon, I received a calendar invite for a client prep meeting. Except when I showed up, the meeting had already happened. My invite had been accidentally sent with the wrong time. In the official recap, my name didn't appear. But I checked the server logs. Someone had manually changed my status to declined. I took screenshots. Another receipt. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was building a ledger, a quiet archive of every erasure, every theft, every manufactured slight. My notebook filled with dates and times. My encrypted folder swelled with files. The silence that everyone mistook for weakness was actually storage. Then came the moment that hardened everything. The new manager presented a dashboard, his dashboard, to a room full of executives. He clicked confidently through metrics, performance charts, glowing arrows pointing up. But halfway through, one of the VPs asked about a discrepancy. "Why do the quarterly totals not match the year-to-date?" He froze. For a fraction of a second, his mask cracked. He stammered something about rounding errors and quickly skipped to the next slide. My boss jumped in, deflecting with a joke, and the room moved on. But I knew exactly why the numbers didn't match. He had stripped out the adjustment formulas I'd built, the ones that accounted for client churn. Without them, the totals were fantasy. Later, he cornered me in the hallway. His smile was tight, his eyes sharp. Next time, make sure your formulas don't embarrass me. Embarrass him. My formulas. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop glowing against the dark. I opened the dashboard file. Version history told the story. My original, with balanced formulas. His edits removing them, time-stamped, undeniable. I printed the audit trail to PDF, receipt number 53. But I wasn't reckless. I didn't leak it. I didn't send it up the chain. Not yet. Instead, I quietly rerouted a compliance pre-read through legal. It was standard. All documentation passed through their office eventually. Only this time I included the original adjustment formulas in the appendix, flagged with the internal audit ID. Nothing dramatic, just enough to plant a clock. Because compliance has a long memory. At the office, I played my role. I shadowed. I nodded. I made sure deadlines were met, even if it meant rewriting his botched formulas at midnight. I stayed quiet when the boss clapped him on the back, saying, "Finally, someone who gets it." But inside, I felt the gears turning. Every theft, every erasure, every smirk was a brick. And brick by brick, he was building his own trap. Silence can feel like surrender. But silence with receipts? That's construction. And while he performed under spotlights, I was laying the foundation in the dark. Because the thing about thieves is that they never stop. They can't. And every time they steal, they leave fingerprints. They just don't realize someone's been collecting them all along. If theft is predictable, arrogance is inevitable. And arrogance is where traps build themselves. By mid-year, the pressure cooker was hissing. Sales had overpromised to clients on delivery dates that weren't just aggressive, they were suicidal. Procurement had waved through a vendor contract without a proper risk check. Why? Because the golden boy had personally approved it. He even bragged about it in a team meeting, twirling his pen like a conductor. "Sometimes you've got to cut through red tape," he said. The boss laughed, proud as if his protege had cured cancer. What they didn't realize was that the red tape existed for a reason. I knew. I'd written half of those risk checklists myself. Instead of arguing, I practiced what I call radical obedience. I did exactly what they asked, nothing more, nothing less. Every time he sent me an instruction, remove this step, skip that validation, don't bother with a failover test. I responded politely, confirmed it in writing, and copied the right people. Per your direction, as requested, I've removed my inbox filled with confirmations, each one another nail in a coffin they didn't know they were building. The cracks grew wider. One afternoon, I joined a client call where the golden boy was presenting our robust infrastructure. The client, sharp and skeptical, interrupted. "Your failover environment, has it been tested under load in the last 6 months?" He hesitated. His eyes darted to me. I stayed silent. He fumbled something about internal confidence and pivoted fast. But the client wasn't stupid. Their contract had a clause. If failover wasn't properly validated, they could terminate with penalties. I noted the timestamp of that question in my call notes, filed it away. Receipt number 74. At night, when I got home, I'd sit at my kitchen table, a lamp glowing against the dark. My notebooks were stacking up. My encrypted folder was heavier than ever. Sometimes I'd flip back through the entries, seeing the slow, inevitable slope of arrogance growing steeper. It was almost mathematical, a line graph of hubris. And like every graph, there's always a tipping point. The boss kept pushing too. He loved to drop lines like, "Winners take shortcuts, losers follow process." He thought it made him sound like a maverick. To me, it sounded like someone rehearsing his own epitaph. One day, the golden boy sent me a request. Scrub error flags from a forecast model. Not fix them. Scrub them. "Execs hate seeing red," he said with a wink. I documented the request, saved a clean copy with the flags intact, and produced a sanitized version for him. 2 files, 2 truths. By this point, I didn't even feel anger, just patience. Because you don't have to push liars off a cliff. You just have to let them keep walking. The climax began with something small. A vendor email landed in my inbox, subject line, pending risk clearance. They were chasing sign-off that never came. I checked the logs. Sure enough, the Golden Boy had manually deleted the risk ticket from the system. No trace, except for the ID number I'd scribbled in my notes when it was first filed. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking. This wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was negligence. Dangerous negligence. So I did what I always did. I documented. I exported the system logs, noted the missing entry, attached my original ticket ID, and saved it all. The next morning, the boss strutted into our stand-up, clapping his hands. "Big week, people! Go Live is around the corner, and I want no excuses. We deliver." I looked around the room. Half the team looked exhausted. Half looked terrified. The Golden Boy looked radiant, like a man who thought gravity didn't apply to him. I smiled to myself, because I knew the truth. Go Live wasn't going to be a launch. It was going to be a mirror. And when that mirror cracked, it would show every shortcut, every theft, every arrogance stacked up like dominoes. I didn't have to push. I just had to watch and wait. Go Live days are supposed to feel electric. Months of prep, late nights, endless checklists, all funneling into one moment when everything finally works. Instead, our Go Live morning felt like a storm waiting just beyond the glass windows. The sky outside was gray, heavy. Inside, the room hummed with forced optimism. Too many smiles, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. The Golden Boy stood at the front like a general, sleeves rolled, hair perfect, confidence radiating off him in waves. "Today," he said, clapping his hands, "we show the world what we're made of." I sat at the side table, my notebook open, pen ready, not to take meeting notes. Those were useless by now. No, I was there to observe, to mark timestamps, to write down in calm, steady lines the exact moment arrogance met reality. It started with something small. A notification on my screen, alert disabled on node 14. That shouldn't have happened. Failover alerts were designed to run continuously. I checked the logs. Weeks ago, he'd signed off on removing noisy alerts to keep dashboards clean. The silence he wanted was about to roar. Within 20 minutes of launch, users started reporting errors. At first, just a trickle, a timeout here, a missing data packet there. He brushed it off with a wave. "Normal teething pains," he said, his voice pitched for the room. The boss nodded, eyes gleaming. Then the trickle became a flood. Dashboards flatlined. Error queues spiked. Transactions piled up, unsent, unacknowledged. The silence of missing alerts hid the depth of the problem until it was too late. Slack channels lit up like wildfire. Engineers pinged me directly. "Do you know why the failover isn't catching? Wasn't this tested?" I typed careful replies. "I was removed from change control per management directive. Please escalate to project lead." Every word deliberate, every word true. The Golden Boy's swagger slipped. He leaned over my desk, whispering through clenched teeth, "Fix this. Now." I looked up at him, calm. "I don't have change access anymore. You signed me out 2 months ago, remember?" His face went pale. He glanced at the boss, then back at me. "Just find a workaround." Around us, executives whispered. Phones buzzed. Clients demanded updates. A VP barked into a headset. "Service credits are already triggering. What the hell is going on?" The boss stepped in, his voice sharp. "Why didn't you catch this?" His eyes cut to me, and that was the moment. I opened my notebook, flipped to the page from the meeting where I was officially pulled from failover validation. In my neat handwriting, per directive, I'm not authorized to execute failover testing. Responsibility assigned. Manager's name. I slid the page toward him, my pen tapping the exact line. Around us, silence fell. Even the frantic clicking of keyboards seemed to stop. The boss's face flushed red. He turned to the Golden Boy. "Is this true?" The Golden Boy stammered. I streamlined the process. It was slowing us down." "Streamlined?" one of the directors snapped. You disabled compliance-mandated checks. Do you realize what this means for contracts? The room erupted. Voices layered on top of each other, legal shouting about breach clauses, finance calculating penalties, operations demanding timelines. The golden boy tried to shout over them, but his voice cracked. I didn't raise mine. I just forwarded the signed waiver email to the distribution list. The subject line was plain. Removal from Change Control Authority. Time-stamped, authorized, undeniable. The effect was immediate. Executives who had avoided my eyes for months now turned toward me, confusion flickering into something else. Realization. The boss barked orders, trying to regain control. We can patch this, it's just a hiccup. But no one was listening, because the truth was written across dashboards bleeding red, across contracts flashing breach penalties, across my quiet paper trail. For months, I had been invisible. A loser, a shadow, a behind-the-scenes nobody. And now, in the harsh fluorescent light of failure, silence wasn't weakness. It was the loudest voice in the room. The golden boy crumpled in his chair, his perfect hair damp with sweat. The boss stood rigid, jaw locked, the weight of realization pressing down. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply wrote the time in my notebook, underlined it once, and closed the cover. The breaking point had arrived, and there was no going back. There's a difference between failure and fallout. Failure happens in a moment. Fallout spreads like a storm, touching everything, ripping apart illusions, exposing what's underneath. The Monday after go-live, the office didn't hum with its usual background noise. It buzzed like a hornet nest hit with a stick. Phones rang nonstop. Executives stalked the hallways with clipped voices and tighter faces. Emails piled up in red flag chains. Urgent. Immediate attention required. Breach notification pending. The golden boy looked hollow. His crisp white shirts wrinkled. His tie missing. Dark circles blooming under his eyes. He lurked near my desk more than once, opening his mouth like he was about to speak, then closing it again. Eventually, he just sat in a conference room alone, staring at his laptop, refreshing dashboards that no longer told the story he wanted. The boss wasn't any better. He stormed around, trying to project control, barking at subordinates, repeating, "We'll fix this, we'll fix this." But the louder he shouted, the clearer it became. No one believed him, because the consequence engine had already started. Contracts don't care about excuses. One client invoked their exit clause within 48 hours, citing the exact failover breach we'd documented. Another demanded service credits, so large they would wipe out half the quarter's revenue. Legal sent out hold notices, every document, every email, every approval now frozen in place for compliance review. And sitting in those frozen files were my neat, time-stamped notes, my forwarded confirmations, my careful your directive replies. It wasn't me speaking. It was gravity. A regulator's inquiry landed by midweek. Dry, bureaucratic, terrifying in its precision. Provide all documentation of compliance procedures, failover testing, and authorization of changes. The golden boy's name appeared on every missing step. The boss's name appeared on every approval. My name appeared too, but only in the right places. The places where I had flagged, confirmed, and stepped back. One evening, as the office emptied out under fluorescent exhaustion, HR called me in. The manager wore her neutral mask, the one meant to soothe and probe at the same time. "We want to understand your perspective," she said. I handed her a neatly organized folder. Emails, logs, tickets, notes. No speeches, no accusations. Just the record. She flipped through it silently, the fluorescent light catching the sheen of each printed page. After a few minutes, she set it down. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in months, someone in authority didn't look at me with dismissal or pity. She looked at me with recognition. The next day, the boss tried another tactic. He cornered me in the hallway, his voice lower now, almost pleading. "You should have spoken up sooner," he said. "You made us look bad." I let the words hang between us. You made us look bad. As if honesty was betrayal. As if silence wasn't survival. I didn't reply. I just looked at him the way you look at a man trying to bail water from a sinking ship with his bare hands. By Friday, the board had called an emergency review. Whisper networks buzzed, directors furious, shareholders circling, leadership scrambling to craft a narrative. The Golden Boy tried to spin, blaming legacy systems, uncooperative staff, even sabotage. Each excuse collapsed under the weight of documentation. He didn't understand. Lies move fast, but receipts are permanent. And I stayed exactly where I had always been, doing the work, keeping the lights on, answering client questions calmly. No dramatics, no speeches, just steady presence. But when executives needed answers, they no longer looked to him. They came to me. Can you walk us through the actual process? Do you have the original validation data? I provided what I had. Clean, dated, signed. No embellishment, no commentary. Just truth. And truth, in those moments, was heavier than power. The boss called me into his office late one evening, shadows long across his desk. He leaned forward, voice tight. If we can get through this, there will be opportunities for you. Bigger role, more visibility. Just let's move forward together. Translation, help me bury this, and I'll throw you a bone. I looked at him for a long time, then said quietly, the documentation speaks for itself. Because it did, and he knew it. Fallout is merciless. Once it starts, it doesn't stop until everything unstable is flattened. The Golden Boy's reputation collapsed first, stripped bare by his own shortcuts. But the boss? His collapse was slower, more agonizing. Every promise he'd made, every boast about winners and losers, now dragged him down, word by word. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I just had to let the consequence engine run. Karma doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives in quiet motions, sealed envelopes, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. By the time it shows itself, the damage is already written. The board review was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. Half the company buzzed with anticipation, the other half cowered in denial. The Golden Boy showed up in his sharpest suit, but his hand shook when he straightened his tie. The boss stalked around like a man preparing for battle, shoulders squared, jaw locked, a script rehearsed in his head. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Shadows never are. But fallout has a way of leaking through walls. People talk, assistants whisper, documents circulate, and by the time the directors walked out of that boardroom, their faces told the story. Something irreversible had happened. Word spread like wildfire. The Golden Boy was terminated for cause. Official language citing policy breaches, misrepresentation, and gross negligence. His badge deactivated before he could clear his desk. The swagger that had once carried him through hallways now looked like a broken marionette shuffle as security escorted him out. The boss's fate was more complex. They didn't fire him outright. They demoted him, stripped him of operational control, reassigned him to an advisory role with no real authority, a figurehead, a warning. For a man who had built his identity on dominance, it was worse than termination. It was exile in plain sight. The official company memo painted it in careful PR gloss. We value integrity. We are restructuring leadership to better align with our values. But everyone knew the truth. The boss had been cut off at the knees, and the Golden Boy had been sacrificed to prove accountability. And in the chaos of this reshuffling, something unexpected happened. Clients who had threatened to leave made a condition for staying. They wanted me leading remediation, not as an assistant, not as a shadow, as the lead. The irony was sharp enough to taste. The same people who had once dismissed me as behind the scenes now leaned on me as the face of stability. The same silence they'd mistaken for weakness was now evidence of credibility. I didn't gloat. I didn't deliver speeches. I sat across from clients, laid out remediation steps, provided clean data, signed my name at the bottom of plans, calm, steady, documented. And every time I saw the boss hovering at the edges of meetings, forced to watch me explain the systems he had dismissed, I felt the quiet satisfaction of karma doing its work. He had once told me winners take shortcuts and losers follow process. But now, in the wreckage of his shortcuts, the only thing standing was the process. My process. The golden boy? He vanished. Rumors said he tried to spin the story elsewhere, painting himself as a visionary scapegoated by small-minded bureaucracy. But rumors fade fast when contracts and regulators speak louder. His name was blacklisted in circles he didn't even know existed. For me, the offers came quietly. Other departments reached out. External recruiters pinged me. My inbox, once filled with humiliations, now held opportunities. But I didn't rush. I wanted the timing to be mine. Because revenge isn't loud. It isn't quick. It's measured, deliberate, inevitable. One evening, I walked past the boss's office. The lights were on, but the room was empty. His once chaotic desk, now sterile, stripped of power. His nameplate still sat on the door, but it looked like a relic from a fallen empire. I paused just long enough to register the image, then kept walking. The wheel had turned. Not because I fought louder, not because I played dirtier, but because I trusted silence and receipts. And when arrogance built its tower too high, gravity did the rest. Karma had landed, and it hadn't missed. In the weeks after the fallout, the office settled into a strange quiet. Not peaceful, more like the silence that lingers after an earthquake, when everyone is still counting cracks in the walls and wondering if the ground might shift again. The golden boy was gone, erased from the system as if he had never existed. His desk sat empty for days until facilities came to box it up. No farewell card, no signatures, no good luck cake in the break room. Just absence. The boss, once the loudest presence in any room, now floated like a ghost. He still wore his tailored suits, still carried his swagger like armor, but people didn't flinch when he entered anymore. They didn't scramble to please him. They didn't fear him. He was a man stripped of gravity, orbiting meetings without impact. Every so often I'd catch him watching me, his eyes unreadable, regret, resentment, maybe both. Clients, on the other hand, wanted certainty, and for reasons no one could deny, they saw that in me. Calls that once bypassed me now came straight to my desk. My name appeared on contracts, my initials on approvals, my words in official statements. The same executives who once praised the golden boy now deferred to me. It was surreal, not because I'd changed, but because they had finally noticed what had been there all along. One afternoon, the boss asked to see me. His office felt smaller now, the once chaotic desk cleared of clutter, the walls bare where awards had been taken down. He gestured for me to sit. He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. His voice was low, almost human. "I pushed you hard," he said. "I shouldn't have said what I did. About being a loser. It wasn't fair." For a moment, I just looked at him. Months of silence sat between us. Heavy, undeniable. I thought about the conference room that day. The laughter, the humiliation, the way he'd smirked when the golden boy took my work and my credit. And now here he was, trying to stitch over it with a handful of weak words. I didn't reply. Silence was all I had left to give him. The same silence he once mistook for weakness. The same silence that had carried me through. When I stood to leave, he didn't stop me. That night, at my kitchen table, I opened my notebook one last time. The pages were thick with entries, dates, times, directives, receipts. I flipped to the very first line. "You're a loser. This new manager isn't." I traced it with my finger, then turned to the most recent entry. Board review complete. Manager terminated. Boss reassigned. I closed the book, slid it into a drawer, and locked it. Evidence had done its job. Gravity had finished its work. The following week, an offer came through. Not from inside the company, from outside. A competitor who had watched the implosion and quietly reached out. Better pay, better title, better culture. They didn't want me to be a shadow. They wanted me to lead. When I handed in my resignation, HR looked startled, then resigned. The boss wasn't even in the room. He didn't deserve to be. On my last day, I walked out past the glass facade, the same building where I had once seen my reflection blurred and small. This time, I saw something different. Someone calm, steady, unbroken. Not a loser, not even a winner. Just someone who had let arrogance destroy itself, who had trusted silence to do what shouting never could. I didn't throw a party. I didn't send a mass email. I just packed my things, nodded to the security guard, and stepped into the cold air. The story didn't end with fireworks. It ended with choice. My choice. And as I walked away, I realized that was the real victory. Not the downfall of the golden boy, not the demotion of the boss, but the fact that I had carried myself through every insult, every theft, every humiliation, without losing the only thing that mattered, my own gravity. Because in the end, silence wasn't emptiness, it was strength.